Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show and our special live coverage of the vice presidential debate between Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. The moderators were not much better. They were a little better than ABC News. But J.D. Vance put on a masterclass in how to handle biased moderators and a lying opponent. And it was a thing of beauty. It was beautiful. It was like every Republican or Republican voter or person who, in this case, is rooting for Trump knows exactly what I am feeling right now, which is just, thank God. It just listening to a guy go out there and know how to raise the right points in response to the right questions, to not take the moderator's bullshit. It was really cleansing. It was just, you never see it. It's just so great to see. The moderators are gross. Margaret Brennan, not only do you desperately need some bronzer, you need to understand how to moderate a fair debate when you have half the country who's rooting for the other guy. She didn't even attempt to be fair. I mean, I'm going to utter words I never thought I would utter. I preferred Norah O'Donnell. Oh my God. This Margaret Brennan, she used to have a reputation as being kind of like reasonable. Like she flirted with the Catholic right, the Christian right. And when you get on issues of faith, she could be kind of like normal. No. She's been in the soup too long. She's gone totally native over there at CBS News. You were terrible, madam. Terrible. The moderators were disgusting, but J.D. Vance was a vision. And Tim Walz really did indeed look like the bumbling knucklehead he said he was. Oh, there's so much to go over. We have a full lineup of guests for you tonight. We've got in-depth analysis on what we just witnessed and what it will mean with just a little over a month before Election Day. We're also monitoring the media reaction, which we'll bring to you. It's always fun to highlight. But first, well, you heard my initial thoughts. Let me get to my guests. Rich Lowry is here. He's editor-in-chief of National Review. And Eliana Johnson is here as well, editor of the Washington Free Beacon and co-host of the Ink-Stained Wretches podcast. Rich, do you feel me? Are you picking up what I'm putting down?
Totally. I don't know how he possibly could have improved on that performance, substantively, tonally, just everything. In terms of the message he was driving home, he brought it back to the economy and the American dream and how we need to revive it. He constantly made the point that Kamala Harris is in power now, and why hasn't she done all these wonderful things that she's promising? The only thing that was difficult for him, I think, was the January 6th thing right at the end. That's not his fault.
Yep,
right. Donald Trump has created that vulnerability, but he deflected really deftly there as well by getting it onto the censorship. So I'm not sure when I've seen a better debate. Maybe, I don't know. I have no use for him, obviously, because my politics are opposite, but maybe Barack Obama at his height in 2008. But this was just an extraordinary performance, a stellar performance. I'm not surprised that he was great because we've kind of seen it out on the campaign trail and in various interviews with hostile interviewers. But I was a little surprised at how pathetic Tim Walz was. Came out of the gate nervous, hemming and hawing. And then just the way he looked when he wasn't speaking on camera, he looked nervous, he looked sad, he looked befuddled. He kind of looked like the kid in the back of the classroom that can't keep up with the lecture and is desperately trying to take notes. It was just a terrible look.
Look at the picture.
Great night for JD.
Eliana cannot relate to that kid. She was the front kid in the front of the class every time. This is the classic. This J.D. Vance look will go down. This will be on people's Christmas stockings. Here's one thing I wanted to add. You know what was so masterful about what J.D. did tonight? He's been demonized by this press since he was named as the running mate. And he completely shattered that tonight. He was kind. He was likable. He complimented his beautiful wife. He brought up his kids. He kept giving Tim Walz points. Like, I kind of agree with that. He said the thing about how if I don't win and he becomes the vice president, I will help him. He did such an effective job throughout the whole 90 minutes of showing America, I'm actually a nice guy. And those women, those female Republican voters who left the party, who are now going to vote for Kamala Harris, if he was the problem, the childless cat ladies, which did not come up, I have to imagine they're looking at him just a little softer tonight, Eliana. But your thoughts on what we saw tonight?
I thought it was an extremely impressive performance on Vance's part. And I have to imagine that Rich and many other conservatives like me were thinking the same thing, which is watching JD Vance. It was clear that he prepared a lot, not only in terms of the substance of his responses, but also in terms of the style. He knows how to be combative, but he wasn't that combative tonight. He came across as very, very likable. And I kept thinking, this is the job everybody wishes Trump had done. Because in terms of the discipline of his responses, he brought every response back to, well, who's been in office for the past 3.5 years? Kamala Harris. It started with the first response to the question that was on Israel and Iran, and talking about a world in flames and the chaos that has engulfed the world over the past 3 years. And he brought that back to the doorstep of Kamala Harris. But for as good as Vance was, Walz was extremely weak. And people were talking about, the Harris campaign was deliberately lowering the bar for Walz. CNN ran a story saying, Tim Walz is really, really nervous. And there were questions about whether this is a strategy so that he can go out there and overperform. Well, they didn't actually lower the bar enough because he was extremely bad. And, Vance, people are commenting on Twitter that he's really benefited from doing so many media interviews and from having so many combative exchanges with the press. Well, he was better than than any interview he's done since walking on that stage in Milwaukee. And for Walz, there are a lot of people out there saying he should have done more interviews. Maybe, but on the other hand, watching him tonight, you start to understand why the campaign doesn't actually want him out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. When he's in front of a friendly interviewer, like when he used to go on MSNBC before he got chosen, sure, that could be a friendly, fun exchange in which you do well. This is a totally different ball game. And it is interesting now that CNN article yesterday setting the expectations low now seems like a clarion call. Like,
that's the one thing they've told the truth about the whole campaign.
Oh, also, Walz's biggest lie the whole night came at the end when he said, "I've really enjoyed this debate, JD."
I will say.
Okay, so I think all three of us felt, I'm guessing, that the one moment where he went after the moderator for his time. He was fact-checked by the non-fact checkers who were fact checkers, but only, again, of J.D. Vance. They let Tim Walz get away with lie after lie. And, Jesus came down and told him this is what Republican voters want to see. He wasn't having it. He insisted on having his time. Forgive me, but those bitches tried to cut his mic, and it was unbelievable. Here's the exchange in SOT 1.
Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes.
And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created.
Gentlemen, The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
I am dripping contempt, dripping contempt out of my pores for CBS News in that. That was such a dereliction on so many levels. Hello, you morons. A debate is unfolding. Alert, note to anchor and CBS producers. The debate is happening right here. You let it fire up. Let them go. Eliana, we talked about this a million times before we prepared for our debate back in December. When you have fire on the stage, let it play out. This is a real issue. This is a huge issue, and it's voters' number one or number two issue in virtually every poll. You didn't have a lot more to get to. There was a lot of inanity in that debate, including your next question, which was about climate change. And good for J.D. Vance for fighting on it.
Oh, when Trump was fact-checked multiple times and Harris was not fact-checked at all, I think it was on your show, Megyn, when I said he should have been prepared to be unjustly fact-checked. And that's exactly what JD was prepared for tonight. And he did a wonderful job with that. I think any Republican candidate should be prepared when they walk on a stage on a mainstream media network to be treated unfairly and to hit back exactly as Vance did, because viewers like it. And I think both independent and persuadable voters like to see it, as well as the base.
And Rich, for Tim Walz to try to say that the CB1 app has been in place since 1990, this is nothing new that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden did, is such a lie. That's what Vance was about to say. Like, this has been one of the most controversial things you've done while in office. She's done while in office. And they cut his mic and moved on to climate change.
It's so shocking. And you said, let the fireworks play out during debate, but the fireworks are between Margaret Brennan, who created this misleading impression of what's happening. Yes, these migrants are legal, but as J.D. Vance was pointing out, they're only legal because this whole new dispensation and system has been created to launder them into the country when they wouldn't have been otherwise. That's an extremely relevant piece of information. She's being misleading and he's being accurate, and they cut his mic. It's totally outrageous. I made a rude gesture to the screen as I was watching. I didn't tweet the rude thought the way you did, Megyn, but you're totally justified in doing this. It's such a dereliction of professionalism on every single level. And just to Eliana's point, it all goes back to JD's performance tonight. All goes back to being so well informed. He knew it better than she did. He knows it better than Tim Walz does, obviously. And that was the key to his entire.
I think he does it better than Trump too. I want to correct myself. They didn't move on to climate change there. That was earlier in the debate where something was starting to unfold, and once again they cut them off because they really desperately needed to get on to climate change. Every single debate we've had climate change. We've had January 6th. Not one question, not one, on Tim Walz's radical trans refuge policies in his state, seizing custody from loving parents who won't affirm their child's gender confusion so they can have body parts chopped off. Not one. Not a question about his military lies, his stolen valor, nothing. But back to J6, back to climate change, a lot on healthcare. We've had a lot already on healthcare. None of these social issues matter to these moderators because in their elite circles, they don't have to deal with this. They're not going to actually have to worry about any of this. And they're just not interested because they think no one cares. It's just not, it doesn't affect anybody and no one cares. Okay. It's infuriating. So, Rich, what did you think was the best moment of the debate? Separate apart, it could have been something for Tim Walz. It could have been something for J.D. Vance. But what was the moment that stands out to you, I would say, after the obvious one that I just played where CBS cut those mics?
Well, JD was so masterful on the border. That was pretty early on. It was just clear he had complete command of the facts and of this stage. And Walz's worst moment when he was asked about the story that Eliana and the Free Beacon broke about how he wasn't in China during the Tiananmen Square massacre. And he I don't know. Obviously, they prepared that answer at some level, but he nearly had a meltdown towards the end of it. And I don't think really he began to look. At first, he looked nervous when he wasn't speaking. After that, there was a period where he just looked sad. And I think one really interesting dynamic that I wouldn't have guessed at. There was a lot of agreement, and you make a good point. Tim, you make a good point, JD. But it played differently with JD since he was winning. This played as him being magnanimous. It was an element of his kind of control of the circumstances, whereas Tim Walz had felt weak, like, please leave me alone and let's just be friends. And I thought, predicted prior to the debate, Walz would be, the media would say he's a winner no matter what. I don't think that's going to happen now. No. I think it may flip the other way, and they may be angry at him for being so nice to this guy that they've tried to make a villain.
We're seeing some of that.
Months.
We're already seeing some of that online. They're angry at him. In fact, maybe I'll see this. This is David Frum, I think, tweeted out something to that effect. Stand by. I saw it just as I was coming onto the air. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's see. Vance is going home tonight with Walz's wallet. Vance didn't even have to snatch it. Walz just handed it over, along with a bunch of unearned compliments to Vance's fine character. He's angry that JD came off looking like a nice guy and Tim Walz let him. We've got to play that moment of Tim Walz on the lie that he was in Tiananmen Square. He said that he was in Tiananmen Square, that he was in Hong Kong, which, obviously is not Beijing, but that he was in Hong Kong when Tiananmen Square happened. And it was a lie. And he's gotten caught on it. It just came out today. And so you had to know this was going to come up. I mean, maybe they're just so used to being babied by the leftist media that they didn't think it would come up. But here's what Rich was referring to.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Boy. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people.
Oh, gosh, wait, because there's more. Then it went on. There was a follow-up because he didn't answer the question, right? I'm a knucklehead? You lied. At the last debate, it was, I have bad grammar. The last interview, right? I have bad grammar. He told Dana Bash to excuse some of his lies. Now it's, I'm a knucklehead. What does that mean? You lied. Here's the follow-up.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor.
You're laughing.
It looks like Saturday Night Live. It looks like a Saturday Night Live skit. Sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit. I really actually was astonished by that because, look, Minnesota Public Radio had this little anecdote buried in a story yesterday. The Beacon went and pulled the tape and the photographs out. CNN pulled more anecdotes of Walz talking about how he remembered Voice of America not broadcasting and this and that, his elaborate tall tales that he'd. And the New York Times did a story today. So he had to know that this was going to be asked about, given that CNN and the New York Times were reporting about this today. is that the answer they prepared? Is it? Because he could have just said, you know, I said I arrived in June. I actually arrived in August. I misspoke, and I apologize for that. Mm-hmm. Instead, we got
but he couldn't because honestly, it continues his stolen valor theme. Like he elevates everything to make himself sound a little bit better than he actually is. Like the weapons that I carried in war, and he's never fought in war. Like I'm a retired command sergeant major, and he's not. Like I served in Operation Enduring Freedom, which he didn't. He never went to Afghanistan. Like we didn't just do intrauterine injections when we tried to get pregnant. We did the full IVF. So I've got standing to speak on IVF, which they didn't. Over and over and over again. Like the Chamber of Commerce gave me a special commendation, which they didn't. Over and over, he lies to make himself sound a little bit better, a little bit more relevant, a little bit more important than he actually is. And he keeps getting caught. And what we saw tonight here, Rich, was him disassembling because he didn't expect this question to come up. And to be honest, I didn't expect them to raise this either. I didn't think CBS would do it.
Well, as Eliana lays it out, this is a case where some other media outlets have been doing their job as well, which is good to see. And the question was asked, and it was kind of in a way, it was an arrogant question, or certainly a question that tried to evade, because the obvious answer is what Eliana laid out. You just say, I messed it up. I flubbed, June is warm. So is August. I messed them up, and, your memory plays tricks on you. And I'm very sorry. That's all he had to do.
I mean, if I may say though, that's like being like, I was in Lower Manhattan on 9/11. Oh, wait, I was actually there on 9/13. That is a very different experience. Like the reason he was caught is because it wasn't an innocent mistake. If you are in Beijing on the day of the Tiananmen Square massacre where hundreds were killed and shot, like, you know if you were there. You don't, I was confused. You came after. Like, that's why he couldn't do it, Rich. I see your point on strategy.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not saying the answer would be... I'm not saying the answer would be honest.
There's good cleanup and there's bad cleanup. Like, we'd know if he handled it well or if he handled it poorly. It would still be like all of his lies are these, they're puffery that all accrues to his political benefit and places him at the center of events and allows him to better connect with people on political issues. But there's better and worse ways to try to clean up your doo-doo, and that was definitely a worse way.
Yeah. And also, if you're going to give
football coach, that's another one.
Yeah, if you're going to give a shameless answer, you have to be shameless about it. You can't feel guilty about it. And at that end, when he was stumbling around, it's clearly because he didn't feel confident in what he was saying, because he himself knew it was BS.
I know. Honestly, like, if anything, maybe you pull a Newt Gingrich, like, I can't believe you would raise such a petty issue in a presidential debate. There are people suffering out there. You haven't raised what happened in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene.
This was 40 years ago.
And you want to relitigate a difference between June and August, 40 years? This is ridiculous. Yeah. Like, do that. Do something other than, holy shit.
I'm a knucklehead.
Question. I was told there'd be none of those. What did you think overall of the moderators? Because my biggest pet peeve with them was that how they kept stealing the last word, and how their little follow-ups to J.D. Vance, which were very pointed, or the even more annoying ones were to Tim Walz, like, will you comment specifically on the following two things that J.D. Vance just said, which I'm telling you right now are fake, Tim Walz? They're fake. Please fact check him.
Yeah, you could hear it in the tone of their voice. And they're just playing by Sunday show rules. And now a Sunday show, the way it works, a Republican is on. They usually have an elected Republican and elected Democrat on separately. The elected Republican comes on, and every other answer is fact checked, and the host gives his or her opinion to counter it. And it never happens with a Democrat. And it's exactly what they did in this debate. It wasn't as blatant as ABC, but they did at least two fact checks when they said they wouldn't. And the questions to JD had a kind of skeptical tone. And the questions, at least some of them, to Walz were please, can you correct this guy? He's so crazy, J.D. Vance. We need you to help us out here. Do us an assist. Give us an assist because we can't do it ourselves directly. So it's so bad. And as you say, Margaret Brennan, all these people, they marinate in the same world. They socialize with these Democratic operatives. They kind of share the worldview, and it just shows. And they just can't help themselves. Even when they went out of their way to say beforehand, we're not going to do it, they still did it.
I think the kids call it flexing. They felt the need to flex out there. Like, I am Team Democrat, and I see I'm dealing with a disgusting liar. I'm just going to telegraph it. We put a little very short SOT montage. It could have gone on, Eliana. Here's a couple of examples.
President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree? The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course,
migrants.
That's not true. And again,
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children? I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
I mean, it was just so one-sided, Eliana. I love the...
And he still lost.
Here is your multiple choice answer of the things that were incorrect in JD Vance's response.
Yeah, and Walz still lost. And one of the things that happened right off the top was their question on, would you support a preemptive Israeli strike on Iran? Guys, Iran just rained down 200 missiles on Israel today, and Iran's proxy attacked Israel on October 7th. Iran's other proxy, Hezbollah, has been attacking Israel since October 8th. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's also
it was the first question of the debate.
It was also
crazy.
when Margaret Brennan asked that question about migrants and housing, with her voice dripping with contempt. It was so great because JD said, yeah, there's this Federal Reserve study. We'll post it on social media. And I'm sure she had no idea there's a Federal Reserve study. She just considered the idea in and of itself just absurd, right, and preposterous and something he'd made up. When, of course, one of the basic economic laws is supply and demand. So if you create more people that, have more demand for housing and the supply is still limited, prices will go up.
Ask the people in Springfield. I mean, that's one of the things they've been complaining about. But that was the other thing. So she mentions Hurricane Helene and the damage and the devastation that's happening now in the Southeast. And I'm like, okay, this is good. CBS is going to go there. This is not a story that makes Biden and Harris look good. They have not been doing well on their response. She was out in L.A. having beef Wellington and some sort of special blueberry corn cobbler. I don't know what it was. And with a bunch of celebrities partying while these people were dying on their roofs. And Joe Biden was at the beach in Delaware. Okay, so they're raising it. Great. Let's have a tough question for him on the response. No, they turned it mid-question to climate change. Climate change makes these natural disasters much worse. Isn't climate change real and a devastating problem? Donald Trump, the follow-up there, we played it at the top of that SOT montage. Donald Trump said it was a hoax, which he did say back in 2016, and then he corrected himself in 2018 and made clear what he meant. In any event, that's the problem we face, Eliana, right? Like, they try to sneakily get in news of the day, big news of the day. But when the proper landing would have hurt Team Blue, they pivoted to one of their favorite little pet causes.
It's amazing because the hurricane is actually somewhat of a problem for Harris right now, and that she's sort of scrambling. She had no public events today, which is astonishing. And she's sort of scrambling to demonstrate that she's in control of FEMA. And if you look at the issues that voters care about, climate change is extremely low on that list. And so to think that it would be the second question in one of three major national debates is kind of amazing. And I remember talking to you about this, Megan, when it was in the first or second Fox News Republican primary debate, when they asked about it, we were talking about, particularly among Republican voters, why would you raise this question? It is amazing given how many questions didn't get asked. There was no question on China in this debate. There was no question on Ukraine in this debate. And there were serious issues that didn't get asked about in this debate that voters care far more about than climate change. And the hurricane's one of them right now.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It really was amazing in the absence of any, like the way she kept saying to Walz, would you like to respond specifically to the claim that she is letting in fentanyl? Then another one, would you like to respond specifically to the claim that Kamala Harris is letting in illegal migrants?
Oh, the thing about drug mules, too.
She didn't look at JD and say, would you like to respond specifically to his claim that he did not sign a law allowing abortion into the 9th month? Would you, JD Vance, like to respond specifically to his denial that he signed a law removing life-saving care from babies born on the table after botched abortions? That was actually a good exchange. Guys, do we have that one? We do. Okay, let's watch that, because that was actually a very good exchange for Vance, where he was like, you did sign that law, and Walz denied it. And JD was like, what part of what I'm saying is wrong? And Tim Walz fell back on, that was fact-checked at the ABC
the last debate. Yeah.
One of the most controversial fact checks of all time. Watch, here it is, SOT 13.
You're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric.
These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved.
This is what he keeps saying, Rich. We misread the law on Tampon Tim's mandate that tampons go in the boys' bathroom. No, we didn't. We misread the law that babies born to mothers trying to abort them have no right to life-saving care. No, we didn't. We misread the law in which he allowed abortion through the 9th month of pregnancy. No, we didn't. That's what he misspoke on all of his lies and all of his laws. We're just confused. We misread the law. J.D. Vance is a lawyer who went to Yale Law School. I am a lawyer who practiced law as a litigator for 10 years. We didn't misread the law. It's very basic statutory construction. He's just a liar. Yeah.
So he's completely wrong about that. And JD challenged him in a way that cornered him, but not in a way that made JD seem like a jerk. It was very, very deftly handled. And the whole abortion exchange, it's no secret that this is an issue where Republicans are on their back heel politically. And JD spoke about it in ways I've never heard a national Republican talk about it, where he's, the referendum, how did I change on this? The referendum went against me in Ohio, and it made me think about it more. So
stand by, Rich. Let me play it, and then you take it on the back end. SOT 14.
I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family.
Amazing. Keep going.
Yeah, really well done. And so much effort has been made by the media and Democrats to portray J.D. Vance as a hateful jerk. That's all he is. And for 90 minutes, he put the lie to it, including with that answer. And look, JD played kind of the online right game to win that Senate primary in Ohio, where you kind of put an accent on your obnoxiousness. And so often people who play that game, that's all they can do, and they lose elections. But JD always had this other dimension to him that we just saw tonight, where he can elevate his game. He can be in a different mode. He can be in persuasive mode. And it was just very good, again, from beginning to end. It's just hard to imagine how you improve on any of it.
That is so well said. That was the guy I met back in 17 or 18 and who cried when I talked about his sister, Lindsay, who he loves deeply and who loves him. She's 5 years older than he is. And she can't forgive herself for not protecting him more from the abuse that he suffered at the hands of their mom and some of the men who came through their house, their living situation. And he is an emotional guy in a lovely way, not in a weird way, not a Tim Walz way where he's constantly like he connects with that heartstring thing. And I absolutely have a belief that was genuine, Eliana. And I don't think it was done for the women of middle America. Like, I'm going to be likable now. I think it was a genuine outreach. Like, I get it. Trust me. We're working on it.
I think a lot of hard work went into that performance in terms of preparation and in terms of shifting into this other gear that Rich has talked about. It's hard to know whether it was genuine or whether it was practice, but it actually doesn't matter because it didn't come across as false. And I do think that for politicians, JD, since he was elected to the Senate, and he wasn't a great candidate when he ran for the Senate, he wasn't great in his Senate debates. It is hard for them to shift out of the one gear they've been in. And the one gear JD's been in is combative and feisty. And that wasn't the person we saw tonight. And that is what makes me think that an extraordinary amount of preparation went into sort of practicing getting into this different gear that was sort of a more humane, moderate, the person that we saw in that and relatable. Sort of the word that I was searching for.
I think he did the Trump Vance ticket a lot of good. I think what he did tonight was help restore the equilibrium on the narrative about him. It's not completely countermanded, but he helped restore it by having an audience of millions and just letting people see who he really is. Whether this will change the trajectory of the race, I don't know. I don't know that Trump needs the trajectory of the race changed. But I think the narrative on J.D. Vance has to change after tonight. And he did a great job of hammering on policy and the difference between the two candidates at the top. He did everything he could possibly do. Now what we need is for Donald Trump not to get so irritated by all the praise that J.D. Vance is getting. That he posts something not great. That's keep him away from Truth Social. I laugh. But tonight, actually, Trump said very nice things to JD before he went out there. He reportedly said, just have fun, have a great time, which is really sweet. That's good. Takes all the pressure off. Guys, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to be right back with the hosts of the morning meeting. This is Mark Halperin's program. He's coming on. Sean Spicer will be here. And we're going to get into, there's a new Democrat that they're bringing with them. What do the Democrats think? What do they think? Because I'll tell you what's happening right now. I'll give you one example. Claire McCaskill, MSNBC contributor, now former senator, tweets out, I actually think most Americans fundamentally understand that the VP is not the president. So Kamala Harris had absolutely no responsibility for any of those mean things that J.D. Vance raised. Oh, and by the way, if you think Tim Walz is a moron, he's only going to be the VP, which is not the president. It covers all bases, that tweet. I don't think they're feeling very confident about how that went. Is it consequential? We'll ask it on the opposite side of this break. First, though, Kamala Harris is proposing some massive tax hikes, an almost 40% top income tax rate, 7% increase to the corporate tax, a capital gains tax on unrealized gains for some. And then there's the fact that she's proposing to add almost $2 trillion to a current $2 trillion deficit. You might be thinking it's time to make more of your savings tax sheltered. Seems like a good idea. Not to mention inflation sheltered. Well, this is why I want to tell you about Birch Gold Group. Birch Gold is going to assist you in converting an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, if you would like. And the best news is you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just text the letters MK to 989898 and get a free info kit on gold. There's no obligation, just info on fortifying your savings before the crazy really hits. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers. Text MK to the number 989898 for your free info kit today. Okay, joining me now with more. The three hosts of The Morning Meeting, a fast-growing interactive show on the Two-Way YouTube channel. Mark Halperin is editor-in-chief of Two-Way. Sean Spicer is a former White House press secretary and host of The Sean Spicer Show. And their usual co-host, Tim Hogan, had to step away for the rest of the election season, so they have now added Dan Turrentine, a former Democratic strategist. Guys, welcome. Dan, good to have you here for the first time as well.
Thank you.
By the way, Megan, I just figured out why Tim left. He definitely got a heads up about this debate, and he didn't want to be on with you to have to account for it, because I was wondering why Tim couldn't handle us. And it's not it. He knew that you were going to come on your show, and he was like, after that performance by Tim Walz, I wouldn't want to have to answer for it.
All right, I'm going to start with Dan, our new friend, because he's a Democrat, and I would love to get your reaction to kick it off to what we just saw.
JD Vance did absolutely terrific tonight. And I say that not to filibuster, but because, he was comfortable, he was confident, he was in command. And in comparison, I thought Tim Walz looked a little overwhelmed. He looked, frankly, a little small and simple. Democrats always have talked about for the last 2 years what would happen if they ran against somebody who didn't have Trump's kind of personal baggage, his conduct issues. And I think you saw it tonight. JD Vance just really prosecuted the case about, why haven't you done it? You talk a great game, but again, why haven't you done it? I think the best thing, as you were talking about with your previous guest, I'm not sure ultimately people make their decision based on the vice president. I think where Vance might have fallen a little short is one of the goals of the Trump campaign is to paint Harris and Walz as dangerously liberal. And I don't really think they did that. They just focused on, you haven't done the things that you're proposing now. But that's about it. I think, a charitable thing that one could say about the performance tonight.
Fair point on that last issue. I think they too also that they should have done that, and we didn't hear a lot of that tonight. And they're doing it more in their ads and so on. Mark, what'd you think?
4 quick points. First, I don't think it fundamentally changes the race on the margins. I think Vance becomes a much more valuable surrogate now, because I think it's going to be harder for the press to mock him. I think Republicans will be really enthusiastic to greet him on the campaign trail in those Rust Belt states. And that helps because, he's the main surrogate. And they sort of flipped it right now. He's the policy guy and Trump is the attack dog. Number 2, I think it positions Vance to be a very big part of the Republican Party in the future. He demonstrated how to speak MAGA to the suburbs, and that's what Donald Trump can do on occasion. But Vance did a master class on it tonight. On the Walz side, I think he's lucky that he was bailed out by the moderators, because what was a mismatch would have been a massacre had it been a level playing field. His performance was shaky at best. He had a few good moments, but I really do think they dodged a bullet. And as you see from tweets from Claire McCaskill, you read from David Axelrod, the Democrats are clearly trying to play this down. Finally, and it gives me no pleasure to say this, I just don't understand how a news organization that watched the disastrous and surreal performance by ABC could engage in a moderation of a debate that's supposed to be fair to both sides in such an unequal way. It was shocking to me that once again, we saw an uneven performance by them, just not even close in the subjects that were chosen, in who they chose to fact check, in who they gave time to and how they framed rebuttals. It's just stunning to me that in this day and age, after we've seen what the reputation of the so-called mainstream media is like, that CBS could have put together such a performance.
Mark, the mic cut moment when J.D. Vance, a debate was unfolding. They were actually starting to go at it. It was interesting, and it's on one of the most important issues in the country. And those CBS producers cut his mic. It was malpractice. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, that's one moment, but the whole thing, I mean, just look at the subjects that they chose. And as Sean pointed out, what they left out. I mean, I don't understand it on the one hand. On the other hand, as I said after the first debate, if you go to a Chinese restaurant, you can expect to be served Chinese food. And the Republicans agreed to do a debate on CBS. They obviously had to expect some of that. But I am as someone who studied liberal media bias my whole career and worked in newsrooms like that. I just can't believe that that's what they think is the way to serve all the American people with the responsibility, the solemn responsibility they have to be the moderators of a presidential debate. I just breathless at thinking about what they did.
You know, the other piece of it too, Sean, is that I can tell you, having moderated these, some warmth would be nice. You don't have to go out there like it's a proctology exam. You know, you can genuinely smile and say, I'm sorry, I know. All right. And you can say, I will let you guys finish this exchange. And then after this, I have to move on. You don't have to be so stiff and unlikable. And look, I don't mean to be personal, but Margaret Brennan's makeup looked very severe. She looked very pasty. I meant it when I said she needed a little bit of bronzer. She needed to warm up in a couple of different ways. I don't think they did her any favors because she came across as very cold and unlikable. And you're not supposed to lose the debate as the moderator, right? Anyway, Sean, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, I agree. I mean, I wish I could say I was shocked. I do honestly believe, though, that they felt like they had a mission, which is we need to stop Donald Trump. And this was our last potential effort. So they understood the mission at hand. ABC, they got their mission. They tried to inject themselves. And I get Mark's point, and I agree with him 100%, except I think the media has recognized after 2016 that they have a bigger role to play. They believe fundamentally that they have to do everything they can to stop the resurgence of Donald Trump and the return to the White House. I mean, the topics were unbelievable. It literally was like, we don't need to give you the questions. Don't worry. We got you this time. We're going to cover all the key things. But to your point, Megyn, they let that debate go on at the end. When it came to abortion, it was like, hey, we'll let you guys go at it because we thought that you were going to have no problem with this. On childcare, they let the debate go on when they thought it would benefit Walz. They cut JD off when it didn't, when they didn't think it was going to benefit him. The bottom line, though, is JD did a couple things that were masterful. One, he constantly reminded people about the top of the ticket. It wasn't about him, his record. He did inject a little bit about Tim Walz, but he made sure that he reminded people they're voting on a president. And he kept going back to Kamala Harris, her record, her time in office. And he also went back to the record and results of Donald Trump over and over again. And that's where I think this is the fundamental existential question right now. This is Donald Trump. He has a record. He has results. If you like it, you know what you're getting. This is Kamala Harris and the last 3.5 years of her. You know, she can't give you any more excuses. JD kept pivoting back to that over and over again. The problem that Walz had fundamentally is Kamala Harris won't tell us where she is on a position. I mean, she hides from the press. She won't tell us why she flip-flops on these issues. So how do you expect Tim Walz, who frankly is handicapped from doing a good job to begin with because he wasn't a good debater, to articulate somebody else's positions that he doesn't know, she doesn't know? And that was fundamentally apparent tonight. He couldn't articulate her position because she doesn't know what it is.
Yeah, that is a tough one. I mean, what did you make, Dan, of the moment where I'm going to guess that the debate prep folks around Tim Walz did not tell him the headline out of tonight's debate should be you with the caption under it, I am a knucklehead.
I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, look, this is something that if the Harris ticket loses is going to be, picked apart now for a long time, which is just like the top of the ticket. Tim Walz was picked partly because he was such an effective communicator this summer, making the case against Trump and Vance. But ever since he was selected, like Harris, he has done very few interviews, very few press conferences. And so he looked rusty up there tonight, right? I mean, normally you would explain these things, a month ago, you would have been asked, 20 times now, and it would be old news a little bit. And I know this latest attack on about whether he was in China at the time is new, but all these things have built up. And so going into tonight, everyone wanted to know, how is he going to deal with both defending his own record, his own personal history, Harris's record, and the evolution of that record, because we haven't heard from him. And that answer, it's not as bad as Dan Quayle against Lloyd Benson. And I said to someone earlier, thank God it took him 2 minutes to wrap himself in a pretzel, because if he did it in 10 seconds, it would be on the internet for the rest of our lives.
They'll be dicing it down to 10 seconds. I'm sure they already have.
By the way,
can I just
go
ahead, Sean.
The Tiananmen Square answer, I think, look, the knucklehead answer was I'm so glad he said it. But the reality is that you were either there or you're not, right? And we see this continued pattern with him. He lied about IBF. He lied about his record in the military, both in terms of the use of command sergeant major, then the weapons of war. He lied about receiving an award from a Nebraska Chamber of Commerce. The guy has a pattern of lying about it. And then we get asked tonight, very simply, were you there or not? It's not like you're like, you know what? I forgot I was in a Target parking lot in Edina, Minnesota. You either were in Tiananmen Square or you weren't. And the idea that he couldn't answer that question, I mean, no one says to yourself, you're right. It wasn't Tiananmen Square. It was outside the Dwayne Reed. It doesn't. I mean,
I thought I was at Iwo Jima, but it was just a movie about it.
And look at how well J.D. Vance on a couple of occasions said, I misspoke. Like he just owned it and pivoted right off of it. I mean, it was a masterclass in how to get out of it, whereas Tim Walz was just, twisting himself.
But then, to add credibility to Tim Walz's own argument, he either intentionally misspoke on the debate stage tonight, or he told the truth. Either way, this is not a good answer. SOT 15 on the subject of school shootings.
Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it.
Wait, what? Right?
Yeah,
what? I don't know if he meant that.
School shooting victims.
Go ahead, Mark.
He meant school shooting victims.
So.
I just want to go back to the China answer. I'd love to know how they rehearsed it, because I'm sure they prepared for it. But the mind and the kind of posture of someone who could give the answer as bad as he gave. I mean, I don't know what he was trying to accomplish with that answer, but Vance didn't go after him, right? You imagine if Trump had been in that situation and his opponent had given an answer like that, he would have gone right after him. I thought a big part of what Vance showed tonight was he showed grace throughout, small moments and large. When he learned apparently on stage that Walz's son had witnessed a shooting, he said something about it.
Stand by, Mark. Let me play it and you take it on the back end. SOT 16.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting, and I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. So. Christ have mercy. It is awful.
Keep going.
So he I mean, there's so many things he did tonight that Donald Trump would never do. They're just not part of his DNA. That's one of them. But I just think, like Ross Duthard of the New York Times, whose judgment I respect, who's a conservative but no lover of Trump, but does respect J.D. Vance, said it was the best Republican debate performance, in recent memory. I think moments like that, the fact that he was willing to say congenial things, and graceful things and show grace to Tim Walz, I thought, again, strengthened his appearance. And again, all the things he did tonight that were strong go right back to why he was chosen in the first place. A much derided pick, in part because the media has gone after him. What did he do? He put a suburban dad face on MAGA. He spoke MAGA in a way that centrist voters could appreciate. He wasn't cruel. Now, the Democrats will say he's a liar, he's a phony, etc. But he's a really popular guy with a lot of people who know him. And you saw that tonight. He was the version of himself that people who like him, and I know a ton of people who like him and respect him. I also know a bunch of people who think he's a phony, but he was his best self tonight in every way.
But you know
win
what?
A debate.
To your point, I will say that I feel like those of us who knew J.D. Vance prior to him getting picked, like had spent some time with him, were in favor of this pick. And people who didn't know him weren't, because they were solely looking at it through the eyes of, get Nikki Haley so we can get that wing of the party behind Trump.
Right. Yep.
But those of us who knew J.D. Vance knew fully this side of him more than the public-facing side, and knew that this would come out, knew that he was actually very bright and like a very gifted mind. I mean, think of how this kid had zero advantages, and basically, after having served in the Marines, got himself through Ohio State in 2 years with a double major. And then on to Yale. I mean, you could see how brilliant this guy was last night. And think of what it takes to overcome the childhood adverse experiences he had, completely by your own bootstraps, absolutely no connections, to get yourself up to that. Like, that's what we saw tonight. Somebody with heart and a gifted intellect and all the skills needed to express both. And so, Sean, that's why it was like, you know, I talked about I opened the show by saying, if you're a Republican or if you're right of center, you watch it, you were like, thank God, like finally somebody who can do that.
But you know, the funny thing is that for so long, since JD frankly was picked, you've heard from the media that this guy is nuts, he's crazy, he's extreme. Tonight, for the first time, people heard from him in an extended way. And I think, to Mark's point, the way that he talked, the way that he interacted with Walz, there are people that are probably like, why is he not at the top of the ticket now? He won a lot of people over tonight. Frank Luntz did a focus group tonight where he talked about the fact that most of the people came over to the JD side by the end of it, which was a shock from where they started. Tonight, people were reassured why Donald Trump picked him tonight. One small incident, and I was talking to Dan off camera about this. It was funny because during the Harris-Trump debate, she would do this tactic where she'd go, 1, 2, 3, 4, your tie is ugly. And Trump would go, my tie is great. It's the most, and he took the bait. Tonight, there was an instance at the end where Walz said to JD, your alma mater. And he was referring to Wharton, where JD didn't go to school. He didn't take the bait. And I know that sounds trite, but the bottom line is that JD pivoted right back to talking about Kamala Harris and her record and Donald Trump's, results as president. He understood the mission at hand and did it very, very well over and over again, never taking the bait, always getting back to the key point that he wanted to make, putting the spotlight on Kamala Harris.
Conversely, Dan, Walz did take the bait on what could have been and probably was his best moment of the night, which is when we got to J6. And he said, they asked J.D. Vance, did Trump win? And J.D. wouldn't exactly answer. And we all knew that he was playing with plutonium in that moment, given his audience at home of his boss. And he was on his heels. And Tim Walz for a moment was like, you didn't answer the question. Did he win? And J.D. Vance is like, the thing to talk about is censorship. You care so much about the Constitution. Why do you censor under the First Amendment? And Walz took the bait. And I was like, Democrats, welcome to our world. This is how we felt, right? We watched Trump chase all the liver snaps that were thrown out for him by Kamala Harris.
Hey, Megan, something that just came in my inbox. Joe Klein, who hates Donald Trump, thinks J.D. Vance he calls him a mortal sleazeball. His headline is, Coach gets clobbered. It was an embarrassment. And he said it was almost as bad as Joe Biden's performance, he said it was close to as bad. So sometimes debates, left, right, and people see what they want to see. Joe Klein, who's willing to be honest, he's a centrist Democrat, but he hates Donald Trump. His verdict is pretty conclusive.
I mean,
so
Megan,
what does that
I would
mean,
say,
Dan? Do you think Democrats are having any regrets on him? Are they thinking about Josh Shapiro at this point? Go ahead with your point.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll make two. I mean, it's amazing that Vance put Walz on the defensive, not just on January 6th, but on abortion. I mean, it's the first time in 2.5 years that I've seen a Democrat get a little flustered and uncomfortable on abortion. But yes, to go to your next question here, I was, looking at X kind of throughout the night and a lot of my Democratic friends, and there were a whole lot of, why didn't we pick Governor Shapiro? But then, I go back to, again, one of the reasons Vance was picked was that he was good on television. He was an effective communicator. And you didn't see that tonight, and you haven't really seen it the last month and a half since he's been selected.
Okay.
And
so
in this day and age,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. In this day and age, to win a debate decisively and be civil, to be respectful and still clobber somebody, that is really hard to do.
So
I'd
Mark,
be interested,
does
by the
it
way,
matter because you've got the Harris campaign.
Yes.
I'll go to you next, John, but you got the Harris campaign coming out already saying, quote, Vice President Harris believes that the American people deserve to see her and Trump on the debate stage one more time. She will be in Atlanta on October 23rd. Donald Trump should step up and face the voters. So she doesn't want this to be the last memory. That's obvious.
No. Again, I think J.D. Vance now becomes a supercharged surrogate. Republicans the crowds will be bigger. They'll be more enthusiastic. I think it's possible the press will give him a better and more fair hearing, because when you have people like Joe Klein and Amy Walter and others who are looked to as kind of arbiters say this was a mismatch, Chris Cillizza, all these people who never say a nice thing about J.D. Vance saying, yes, he was great. I just think it makes him more valuable. And I don't think the polls will move, but I do think J.D. Vance will raise more money for the ticket now. I think he'll get bigger crowds, more enthusiastic crowds. And I think, again, he becomes the voice of the future for the party in a way that, again, was the whole regional basis for his being chosen.
Look, Megyn, I think
Axelrod tweet you mentioned earlier, among others, was he tweeted out, here's the thing. VPs don't make policy. Presidents do. Who talks about the Pence years? And, many other tweets along that. Go ahead, Sean.
No, I think the point that you're getting at is, does this now force another debate? I think Donald Trump looked at this tonight, and the big question is, does he say, I don't want that I want to show that I can do that? And does Kamala Harris, obviously, you just read it, clearly doesn't want that to be the last word from her side. I've been very skeptical about a third debate, if you will, among this iteration of candidates. I just don't know now. I mean, if I were Trump, I think he's going to say, yeah, I'll go again. I saw how you did that.
No, what? Mark and I are shaking our heads. No. Why?
Sean,
why would he say
it's late? It's late. Maybe that's it.
Sean, were you using some of that Kamala Harris legalized marijuana before this show?
No. Okay, you know what? I'm just telling
talk.
You. I know, but just trust me on this. I'm telling you, I think at least the discussion of it is going to come back up in Mar-a-Lago tomorrow, which is maybe we should. Let's lay out. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see a truth come out that says, if she'll do it here, and here, I'll meet her. But he may not want to do it on the terms that she's laid out. But I think you're going to see talk in the next 24 hours about him wanting to
put a tracking advice on Laura Loomer. That'll be the sign. If she heads down for debate prep, we'll know.
I can't imagine he's like, there was a report on CNN. She's, these two, they're like, I will see you at NBC on this date. And then the other one, I will see you at CNN on this debate. Be there or be whatever. Okay. It's just so crazy. But, so she's saying this is a CNN debate that she's agreed to, that he's never agreed to. And he has still agreed to a Fox News debate that she has not agreed to. Or maybe it's NBC. I'm losing track now. But CNN had a report out yesterday saying he's reconsidering the possibility of going to the CNN debate. So that dovetails. Oh, wait, he just tweeted. Oh, boy.
Some people are saying people are saying he'll do it.
Wait. Hold on, Mark. He just truthed out. Stand by. It reads, Lion Kamala just put out a request for another debate because they lost so badly tonight. Again, it's like the fighter who lost gets up and says, I want a rematch. I beat Biden. I then beat her, and I'm not looking to do it again too far down the line. Votes are already cast, and I'm leading big in the polls. I'll make America great again. She's incapable of it. So it's a no for now. Go ahead, Mark.
No, just some people are saying that they'll do the debate, but it has to be on the morning meeting. That's what some people are saying.
Yeah. True.
Some people. Yeah, they are. Here's another one of those moments, by the way, where you sort of saw the magnanimous J.D. Vance. I want to get this on SOT 18.
It's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Okay, so that was good messaging, and I think I would suggest to you guys was part of the reason why that Frank Luntz focus group, they started off with 12 people. 5 said they were leaning toward Trump. So that leaves 7 at the start up for grabs, or leaning Harris. I'm not clear on where it was, but at the end, he just tweeted out 12-2 in favor of JD. So JD Vance won over. I'm going to have to do the math. 12 minus 5.
7.
It's late.
A bunch. It's a bunch. Megan, it's a bunch of people. He won over a bunch of people.
Yes.
More than half a dozen.
A covey. Yeah. Several.
So wait, that brings me back to Dan. Does that mean, is anybody thinking, I don't think they're going to do a switcheroo, but do you think there are a lot of Democrats tonight saying, what was wrong with Josh Shapiro?
Yeah. I mean, look, and then if Israel and Iran go to war, they'll be like, yeah, now I remember why they did not pick Josh Shapiro. And no, look, I mean, I think if you're the Harris campaign, you just move forward. I would not be surprised if they have some announcement to make in the morning to try to shift the conversation. Maybe she announces she's going to North Carolina or Georgia or something, but you just try to move forward. And at the end of the day, this race probably doesn't change very much. And it's a super close race.
Okay, and I do want to ask you, Sean, because you were... Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Well, she is going to the affected states in the next couple of days. She announced that today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, Sean, because you mentioned this. The abortion answer does deserve a little attention, because it is amazing to see a Republican be able to say, like, hey, you didn't answer. And I will say, to its credit, the moderators at CBS News came in on the abortion question with Walz on 9th month. Is that cool? You never see that. That was Nora. She was the only one out there who was asking. I mean, Margaret was just, I went over it. And he didn't answer it. He did not answer the question. And then when JD tried to pound him on, like, you did sign that law, he lied. And he said he didn't sign it. And he did sign a law saying that you could have an abortion through the 9th month. He did. He just, like, anytime he got pinned down on the line, but it was, again, you never see this happen, Sean.
No, and Dan was absolutely right. This is the first time I've ever seen a Republican effectively communicate better than a Democrat on this issue. But JD's precision on the facts, right? Because it wasn't just the allowing up to 9 months. But the issue that Tim Walz really got caught on was they changed the medical definition of what a doctor was responsible of doing if there was a born alive baby that went through a botched abortion. That's a fact. JD was absolutely right on that. And he pressed Walz on it, and he kept going after him. JD was relentless on this issue. He was spot on the facts. He was empathetic and caring. I mean, he literally did everything that Republicans have been saying that they should do on this issue. I've never in my life seen a Democrat on defense when it comes to this issue. Walz literally blew this issue, which has been their defining and biggest issue when it comes to this election. All of their ads, all of their money, all their get out the vote effort is predicated on this. This is their target-rich issue in terms of expanding the gender gap. He blew it tonight. For the first time in political history, a Democrat got screwed on this issue.
It was amazing to watch JD's surgical-like precision getting in there on things that hadn't been responded to, asking the open-ended questions like, what exactly am I wrong on? How did I misstate it? Which can be the scariest questions to receive up there, like, oh, crap. I thought I would just be able to be like, it's a lie, and move on. he really was. I mean, it really looked like somebody who had gone through a surgical residency when it comes to rhetoric and argument, which is kind of what law school is. And, maybe also at Yale, even though I would recommend Albany Law School for all of you out there. It's a fine pedestrian law school, and you can see the law clearly because you don't have all that ivy in your eyes. It's wonderful. Highly recommend. So, Mark, I'll end with you. Final thoughts on where we are tonight and whether, I know you say you don't think it'll affect the race, but you don't think, and I'm just going to generate enthusiasm and all that, you don't think it's going to lead to a polling bump. And take on my point of Trump doesn't necessarily need a polling bump because right now it's so tight, that's good for Trump.
Well, we'll never know if it'll lead to a polling bump because there's so much else going on right now, right? We've got 3 big stories that have Harris at least a little bit back on her heels, or at least imperiled: the dock strike, the Middle East, and the aftermath of the storm. I think that my Republican sources, who said about a month ago that the polls would move in the Sunbelt states back to Trump, and that Pennsylvania would be a better state for Trump, that may be happening before our eyes. There's some indication in the public data and in the private data that that's happening. So what this will do, as I said, it will elevate Vance as a fundraiser, elevate him as a surrogate. I think it'll also give just Trump himself, I don't think he'll be upset about the performance. I think he'll say, Steve, I was right. I picked him and he turned out to be great, just what I thought all along.
Yep.
I do think it'll give Republicans a shot of confidence. It'll give Democrats a little bit more trepidation about putting Walz out. And of course, we know they have trepidation about putting Harris out. So it gives them a shot of momentum. They certainly win a couple news cycles off of this. But in terms of seeing a fundamental shift in the polls off of it, that's more than any vice presidential debate, even one that's almost an historic mismatch can possibly do.
I can only imagine Kamala Harris sitting at home thinking, what happened to my emotional support governor? Is this what you do when I hire you as my emotional support governor? You say you're a knucklehead. You have a meltdown. You have the weird faces.
She's got to write a thank you note to Margaret Brennan. She's got to get that done on the VP stationery.
Absolutely. I'm sure she'll be in the running for press secretary if Kamala Harris pulls this whole thing out. You guys, it's been a pleasure. Dan, welcome to the party. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Wow, what a night. Okay, we're not done. Eric Bolling's here. He's going to close out the evening like we have every other debate in this cycle, and you're not going to want to miss his analysis. Don't go away. First, though, Hungry Root is a very cool company that you need to know about. This is a very easy way to eat healthy. Are you seeing all the health messaging going around, feeling overwhelmed about how to do it? These guys can help you. They're going to send you fresh, high-quality groceries, simple, delicious recipes, and essential supplements. It's like having someone else do all the planning and shopping, so you don't even have to think about it. Hungry Root gets to know your personal health goals, dietary restrictions, favorite foods, how much time you want to spend cooking, which is basically none for most of us, and more. Then they will build you a personalized cart for the week, including easy, get this, 4-ingredient recipes. Love that, to put those groceries to use. Each order fully customizable. They've got fresh produce, high-quality meat, healthy snacks, and more. Everything from Hungry Root follows a simple standard. It's got to taste good, it's got to be quick to make, and it's got to contain whole, trusted ingredients. Hungry Root is offering the Megyn Kelly Show viewers right now 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/Megyn to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/Megyn. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you. All right, joining me now, Eric Bolling. Happy to tell you that he is host of the brand new show, Bolling, with an exclamation point, which launched yesterday on YouTube, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Bolling! I like it. Bolling! Welcome back to the show. Tell me everything. What'd you think?
Miss Megyn, you guys did a great summary of what went on. And I think you hit on something very importantly with the 4 fact checks by Margaret Brennan only. I think Nora O'Donnell was pretty fair. I think she was even-handed. Margaret Brennan, who I've known a very long time, used to work with her at CNBC prior to her CBS gig. She had so much bias. She had so much animosity when she was talking to J.D. Vance. But you guys are right. The one time And JD really had the composure. JD Vance had a composure when he was called out during an answer that should have been a third rail for Republicans, a layup for Democrats, called out during the answer. And Walz had nowhere to go with it. And then Margaret Brennan, to her credit, maybe it was Nora Down, one of them, to their credit, said, Walz, explain. And then he got twisted himself into a pretzel, started gaslighting. But the point is, I think you see, when they called J.D. Vance weird, that was Tim Walz who came up with that line, and may have been the reason why.
In retrospect, now what a laugh that is.
How ironic that it was Walz who called Vance, and they may have gotten him that pick. And so I think you saw a couple. I think I agree with Halperin, where I don't think this is going to move the needle. I'll get to two reasons. One of them is because I don't think VPs are that impressive or that important. However, Trump's my friend. With a 78-year-old president, he is right now smack dab in the middle of life expectancy in American males. You have to think what would happen. So you look at those two candidates side by side on that stage. If Trump, God forbid, passes away, could J.D. Vance step in? Yes, unequivocally. Independents.
We're good.
Democrats will say no. Independents have to say yes. Same independents. If Kamala Harris wants to go back and pick coconuts from her heritage Jamaican coconut trees that her mom talks about all the time, would America be okay with the Tim Walz as commander-in-chief? I think the answer is unequivocally no. He was nervous. He didn't
Eric,
know where
and
to
remember,
go.
she just a quick interjection. Remember, she just gave an interview where she was at, was it Oprah? I can't remember. No, I think it was Stephanie Rule, where she was like, what was the last biggest decision you've had to make? Like a gut, where you used your gut. And she said, it was selecting my running mate. It was selecting Tim Walz. I just went on instinct. I used my gut. Okay, well, we see where that's gotten us. I'm a knucklehead in a vice presidential debate.
But she also recently has said, during that whole period when she was making that decision, she was under massive insomnia because everything was happening so fast. She was all of a sudden the candidate. Joe Biden was no longer the candidate. She wasn't sleeping. And I think she was just preparing the world for the realization, because she was probably realizing, like we are now, that it was a terrible pick. Now, does it matter? There's the right's going to say, well, it really depends. You can see Trump made a great decision. He picks only the best people. Well, we can say that's not necessarily the case. Trump term 1.0, there were a lot of people who ended up, stabbing him in the back. I would say Mike Pence was a terrible position. In fact, I was interviewing Trump it was literally a week before the 2020 election. Maybe it was 2 weeks. I'm sorry. It was 2 weeks before the election. And I said to him, are you going to replace Vance? And he looked at me. He's like, no one ever asked me that before. No, I'm going to stay with him. In hindsight, it was a bad decision. He should have. Pence. I'm sorry, Pence. I say Vance, I meant Pence. Yeah. So I asked him if he was going to replace Vance in prior to the election. He said, no, I'm going to stay with him. And he should have, because Pence has been proven to be nothing but terrible for Trump and for MAGA, and really for conservatives, real conservatives.
I'll defend Mike Pence, but I realize those two needed a divorce, that it wasn't meant to be. But I think he's a good man. Okay, so here's the other thing. J.D. Vance, I realize it may not have changed his trajectory, but what do you make of my theory that it has rehabilitated him in the minds of some who have seen nothing but negative media coverage about this guy, right? And then suddenly, I don't know what the ratings will be. They won't be as good as the presidential debate between Trump and Harris, but I bet they'll be decent. That they suddenly saw this totally new and different figure who was not this disgusting person, who was actually quite likable, who was polite, right? Because that was a risk, that he would come across as too slick against this Midwestern. He's Midwestern too, but like this folksy, avuncular Tim Walz with the flannel and gee, I'm just kind of like a regular football coach. And he didn't. He did not come across as slick. He was smooth. He was effective, but he was likable.
I think J.D. Vance did what Donald Trump. They wanted Trump to do the first debate, and not the second debate against Kamala Harris. Trump took the bait too many times, and we talked about that. I think had Trump had that same demeanor, that confidence, that cogent delivery, you exuded confidence, I think he would have been in much better shape after the first debate. Here's why I don't think this debate matters. I don't think there should be another debate. I think Trump won the election today, not because of this debate. It had nothing to do with the debate. I think the two things that happened today, we woke up and we saw the 45,000 longshoremen went on strike. That's going to create a massive.
They didn't ask about that.
They didn't ask about it, but it's also going to create a massive problem right now. It already is. Cars are already being stopped at the ports. Things are going to start to back up. Prices are going to start to go up. That's what happens. Oil prices rocketed up $4 a barrel. That's about 40 cents a gallon. That you're definitely going to see it no matter what happens. You're going to see gasoline prices raise anywhere between 30 and 40 cents a gallon if it stops, if they even release, if they even open up the ports right now. It's already on its way up. Prices will go up. And then Iran sending ballistic missiles into Israel. Those two events, I think any independent vote, I think there's people on the right who are going to vote for Trump and on the left they're going to vote for Harris no matter what. But the independent voter has to say, this Harris, Biden, Harris, and Walz now, this whole administration has caused us tons of heartache. The family budget over the last 4 years, they haven't fixed anything. Vance was very smart in saying all her ideas are great, but she had 4 years to do it and she hasn't done anything. So what makes you think anything would change going forward? So I think people realize that. And with this longshoreman strike and what could happen, it's going to sway a vote, an independent vote to Trump. And then you realize under Trump, there wasn't in Israel, there wasn't an attack by Hamas or an attack by Iran on Israel. There wasn't Russia taking Ukraine, going into Ukraine. These things didn't happen under Trump for a reason. Trump at dinner with Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago sends missiles to a Syrian airbase with Russian soldiers on it at dinner with Xi Jinping. The world leaders know, don't F with this guy. Just don't play games with this guy.
Eric, let me play some of that because we have some sound about that I wanted to get on. Here's one of these moments where Vance is responding to a question on what's happening in the Middle East. Watch it. Top 4.
The U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald
Amazing.
Yeah,
you couldn't improve on it.
That's the point. The other point is Barack Obama sent $120 billion in cash and in C-130 transports over to the Ayatollahs in Iran. Donald Trump came in and said enough is enough. We slapped sanctions on Iran. They were going bankrupt. Tehran was looking for food. They were at the mercy of the world. They were on their knees. Probably the third or fourth largest oil producer on the planet was brought down to begging for help under Donald Trump. Trump leaves office. Biden comes in, lifts the sanctions, sends billions upon billions of dollars back over to Iran. Next thing you know, they're funding Hamas. They're funding Hezbollah. Rockets are going into Israel. Israel says,
Yes.
we're not going to wait for this anymore. We're going to take matters into our own hands because you screwed up, Joe Biden. You screwed up and you put us at risk. The world is a safer place under Donald Trump. Like it or not, like his methods or not, it just simply is. And by the way, we're better off for it. If you don't think that translates into other things, safety and security, think about what it does for prices. There's a reason inflation was 1.4% under Donald Trump. Energy prices were lower. Trump wanted to drill as much as he possibly could. I've been an oil trader for 40 years. The only time oil ever traded as low as it ever did, and it traded at zero, it actually traded negative during Donald Trump. Think about that for a second. They were giving away barrels of crude oil because they had so much, they didn't have anywhere to store it. That happened under Donald Trump. Do we forget that? It was $1.89 a gallon. For a reason. It wasn't just markets going back and forth. It was because Donald Trump's policies created more energy, created more supply for energy. Demand was always there. Supply, he created it. Biden comes in, Obama leaves, Trump comes, Biden comes back in. They immediately put the clamps on leasing certain lands to drill on. They say they don't, but they do. And they threaten fracking. One more thing about fracking, if I may. With this, what's going on with the longshoremen and now Iran throwing bombs into Israel, oil is going to be a major, major player. I believe that the election will come down to Pennsylvania. I think that's the state that will decide the election. Whoever wins Pennsylvania wins. Fracking is a major, major industry in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris, they can't trust her. If they trust her that she's going to be pro-fracking after she clearly has stated on several occasions she would ban it completely federally, they're out of their minds. And I think the people of Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, will bring Trump the presidency.
I want to talk about the economy. This is a true area of expertise for you. I love this story, but I remember watching you on the 5 one day, and it was when the White House was shut down for tours under, I guess it was Obama. He was not allowing tours of the White House because of the budget, whatever. And you were like, this is ridiculous. And you said it was like, I don't know, maybe like $140,000 a day to keep the White House open for the tours. And you said, I will personally fund the tours, for the next week if you just open it back up. And Greg Gutfeld responded by saying, I'm just now realizing that this show is not your primary source of income. It was your successful career as an oil and gas trader. So you know of which you speak when you talk about energy and the price. So tell us, what is going to happen now with this potential war in the Middle East and Iran right smack dab in the middle of it?
Well, if you can tell me what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will do in response, I mean, I believe we need to defend. I hate wars, and I don't want any, would never send another American human being into a war. But if you tell me how Joe Biden's going to respond, I'll tell you what. Right now, I think if we defend Israel, through assistance, if you put boots on the ground, God forbid, I think you could see another $200 barrel of oil. You could see another $4 or $5.
What about the strategic petroleum supply?
Yeah, I know where you're going. You led me right into that. The supply that is 770 million barrels of oil that was put into place to protect against just this, a supply disruption to the United States. That was what it was there for. Because Biden raised prices so much with inflation and gas prices were spiking, he released oil to put more supply onto the market to reduce the price of oil. The problem is he gave away or sold out, let's call it this way, sold out more than half of our emergency strategic petroleum reserve. So we're around 300 million barrels, which we're supposed to be 780 filled. So he's sold that out. We don't have it anymore. We use 20 million barrels of oil a day. So what are we, 15 days of supply, God forbid a supply disruption. So he puts us at risk to save his own hide, his own ass, because he jacked up oil prices to start with. It's the worst energy policy we've ever been exposed to. It's even worse than Barack Obama's or
well, that was JD Vance tonight did a very good job of over and over raising energy and just saying it all starts with energy. It all starts with energy.
It does.
There was a sharp exchange on the economy. And unbelievably, I was glad this came up, frankly, because I think JD Vance expected to use it defensively. He wound up using it offensively to begin with, saying they keep citing experts. Like, we don't believe in the experts. We're done listening to the experts. And it was great to hear him say it because Kamala Harris everywhere has been saying, oh, the experts prefer my financial plan to his. Goldman Sachs says my plan is better than his. Meanwhile, the head of Goldman Sachs came out and said, we didn't say that. That's not true.
Right.
So it was good to see J.D. Vance say offensively, like, they're obsessed with the experts. We are obsessed with common sense and the regular man's wisdom. Here's a little bit of that exchange in SOT 9.
I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy.
And, you know, Eric, the other thing, so you mentioned all your favorites there, but the other thing is Donald Trump and what he did to Iran, as you just outlined, was the left was extremely critical of it. They wanted to pretend like that was a real deal, where Iran was really going to disarm and we could really just trust them. And Trump knew it was BS and thought the stick was going to work much more effectively than the carrot. And he was proven right. You know, now things have spiraled out of control and they want to say, oh, it's because we didn't have this lovely deal. Nobody believes that who's been watching this thing unfold. But finally, you have this effective spokesperson for it. And the thing about the experts, is there anybody who's not a far left Democrat alive in this country who is still in the place of, well, I bow to the experts?
I'll tell you what, and again, exactly right. Everyone was warning, don't let them out. Don't let them out of this, the deal that Trump put them into. Don't let them out of the corner. They're on their knees. They're not going to be able to progress with their nuclear weapons. And as even Margaret Brennan said, they're closer now than they've ever been. And that's because they did let him out, and they sent cash to the Ayatollahs and to Tehran. There was a great
response by J.D. Vance. He's like, who's been in the vice presidency for the past 3.5 years? Like, you can't say, like, hello, what did you do about it?
There was a moment of bias, and those who say that Margaret Brennan wasn't biased, I'm telling you, she came from CNBC. I was there at the same time.
Who is saying that?
Watch MSNBC. MSNBC right now is saying Tim Walz won the debate. That's how crazy this is right now. That's how
you know what? Wait a minute. I think we have that. Let's play it. Don't we have that with Rachel Maddow? Do we have that? Stand by. I think we've got it. Hold, please. My team's been working so hard cutting sound bites. Here we go.
I know they're an amazing team, by the way.
They're awesome.
A cordial debate between these two men. I wouldn't describe them as evenly matched because they are so different. So different in style and so different on substance. Very interested to hear from the spin room, to hear from all of my colleagues here, to get to all of the analysis that we're going to get to. I think the big picture takeaway from this is that one of these candidates is much slicker than the other, is a much more practiced kind of professional debate style speaker, and the other candidate won. There was one bad moment for Tim Walz in this debate where he got mixed up and embarrassed in answering a question about exactly what month he had been in China in relation to the Tiananmen Square protest. But then on guns, on January 6th, on Obamacare, on the economy, on blaming everything on the border, back again on healthcare, on abortion, on every issue on substance, J.D. Vance was very polished and very slick, and Tim Walz beat him on all the substantive points. At least that was my take on it.
Wow. Wow. I mean,
there's no way she believes that. She's just right. She's lying through her teeth.
Just be honest. We can say, Megan, I was with you after the Trump-Harris debate. She won. I said she won. She did. She baited him into a place that he wasn't going to go, didn't want to go, and she won that round. Let's be honest, Rachel Maddow. But the point I was making was Margaret knows better than the one question that she asked both of them. She pushed both Walz and Vance on the idea of housing. Remember, housing came up, and when Vance answered Trump's policy for affordable housing, she went at Vance and she said, well, where are they going to get the federal land to do exactly what you want to do? Okay, fair enough. Fair question, right? You don't want to give away federal land. You change the market. You disrupt the free market principles. And then she asked Walz about something he obfuscated, talked about the 3 million homes that Kamala's going to build, but she let it go right there. And you know what? Vance could have picked up on this too. Where are you going to get the land for 3 million homes? Where are you going to get the money to build 3 million homes? Do you know what you're going to do to the cost of construction labor if you take federal money and go put that money towards construction laborers? You're going to pull them away from private sector labor. And then the private sector, they're going to be searching for labor. Price of homes are going to skyrocket. Your prices of homes are going to skyrocket because you can't afford them. Price of free homes over here. Who gets it? It's unfair. It'll cost hundreds of billions of dollars. It's completely disruptive to the free market in housing, one of our most important industries in America. But no one asked him or her yet about where the money and where the land is going to come from for her ideas. It's the bias is incredible. And Margaret Brennan knows
not
better.
that you ever get the chance to sit with her. You don't get this. So Margaret Brennan she hates Trump. She's got a difficult history. First of all, this pair and CBS News has done, I think it's 83% negative coverage of Trump. Of all the coverage that we see on the morning show and the evening show on CBS News, it's 83% negative of Trump. Not quite as high as ABC, which was, I think, 97% negative for Trump, but high. I mean, that's not a lot of positive stories. It's 17% positive or neutral. And this was Margaret Brennan. Our audience may have forgotten this. It was the night of assassination attempt number 1 in Butler, Pennsylvania, when Trump was still bleeding from his head. And this is how she handled it on the air. SOT 50.
He closes with God Bless America, and we saw him raise his hand in the air defiantly, blood on his face as he left the stage.
He is recovering from these injuries now. This was a traumatic event, no doubt, for him. But I did notice there was no call for lowering the temperature, condemning all political violence, and really trying to signal to his supporters as well not to retaliate or to have any kind of escalation.
Margaret, there's something wrong with you, my dear.
Yeah. It's incredible. The sad part is we're probably tied in the most consequential election, certainly in my lifetime, and they owe it to the American people to have a more fair, balanced, to use another Fox term, a fair and balanced debate, because it matters. Why would they put her on there? Why would they allow her to do it?
Put Major Garrett. Major Garrett works for Mother Jones Magazine, Fox News, and CBS News. You can't peg him on his politics. Put him out there. But no, they had to do the two ladies, the two women. Girl power. This is a girl power election because Kamala Harris is running. And it was a fail. Margaret, she embarrassed herself. Really, Norah O'Donnell did fine. Margaret embarrassed herself, and that is a wound from which she will not recover. You, however, have done beautifully here tonight, my friend. It's great to see you bowling. Good luck with the show, and I look forward to listening to it.
I love you, Megan. Always good being on with you, and let's do this again. You're awesome.
Yes, you're on, my friend. I appreciate it. All the best to you. Okay, so I would love to know your thoughts on what we witnessed tonight. I am still not over the mic cutting by CBS News. Just as a real debate, as Vance was making points, as he was pinning down Tim Walz, what do? Somebody hit the panic button. No, points scored against our guy. I'm embarrassed for them. I'm embarrassed. Somebody must have realized that they shouldn't have done that after the fact. So it's just so obvious, right? You don't expect them to be so obvious in their hatefulness towards the Republican and their obvious bias, but they are, and they were. What do you think? It's so late. It's almost 12:30. Will you email me? We're going to go on the air again tomorrow, normal time. We do the show live on SiriusXM Triumph channel at noon East, where you can hear us live. And then later we release the show as a podcast and on YouTube. So I would love to hear your feedback on what you thought specifically. It's Megyn, MEGYN, at MegynKelly.com. So send me an email, and then let's go to sleep and tune back in tomorrow with our friends from the Fifth Column. That'll be fun. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Big response on YouTube and on SiriusXM tonight. We're grateful that you trust us on these big nights. Good night for now.